Welcome everybody to the next session. Thank you first to Simon and Patrick and also you, Stefan, for this awesome event. Thank you for having me and I hope you enjoy the session. This session will be about how to deploy WVD. We're going to use Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions. So we're going to touch both of them, how you set them up, how you use them to deploy WVD. See what are the things you need to take into account, and also at the end a small conclusion. It happens that you joined the wrong meeting, the wrong session, so I added a small GIF in it. So if you're in the wrong session, you need to skip stage. This is about Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions, so you can still switch. For the people who love memes, this is the original. So. Small introduction, my name is Micha. I'm an Azure architect at my own company, so I'm an independent contractor. I work at Aspects, where I'm a technology strategist and also part of the cloud expert team. I also work for NXP in the Netherlands, where I do a WVD solution and deploy it. I became MVP on WVD at the end of December. So the end of December 2018, and I'm in two Belgium user groups, MC2MC and Tech9. If you want to present the session, do not hesitate to contact us. We have a call for speaker always open, so you can always submit a session. Enough with the introduction, let's dive in. First things first, we have to prepare our Azure DevOps. Before you can do anything in Azure DevOps, you have to prepare it. How do we do this? First, connection to Azure. Azure DevOps cannot deploy anything unless we allow it. So we're going to need a service connection in Azure DevOps, which enables Azure DevOps to publish or do anything in our Azure environment. Second part is the variables. We can use variables across our build and release. And we're going to use that to store variables which we can use in our CI/CD pipeline. Secret management, also important because we want to store our secrets somewhere. We're going to look into that one as well. And the first step is, of course, create our new repository. Not too much slides, it will be more demo, so we're going to dive right into it. This is my Azure DevOps environment. I created an organization, Micha. Inside that one, I created a project. So if you start with your organization, you will see nothing over here. So you can add a new project. My project is called My Code. I will add it to this one. And first, we need our service connection. To add a service connection, you go to Project Settings at the bottom left. We go to Service Connections over here in the menu. And over here, you can add a new service connection. If you click on it, you select ARM, Azure Resource Manager, of course. And then you can go for a automatic service principal, where Azure DevOps will create the service principal for you in your Azure environment. You need sufficient permissions, of course, to create such service principal, but that will not always work. If you give me 1 second. Sorry for that. In large environments, it will be most a manual operation where you first create your service principal and use that one to connect to the Azure environment. But these are the options. If we look in our Azure environment, in our Azure directory, you will see, and if we dive into this, and we go for app registrations, and we would go for my Azure DevOps SPN, then you will see that I have my Azure DevOps SPN, and then you can assign permissions, API permissions. These API permissions can be used to do something in your Active Directory. Next to that, if you want to do something in your subscription, you need to grant it permissions in your subscription, of course. So you dive into your subscription, go for access control, and assign role permissions. You can do this on subscription level, but also on a resource level if needed. So this is my service connection. Once you have this in place, Azure DevOps can do operations in your Azure environment. Second option, second stage that we wanted to do is create variables. Variables, this is in the library. So if you are in your project, you click on pipelines, you go to library, and then you can create a variable group. And a variable group can be used in both build and release pipelines. So you can use those across both environments. It's as easy as clicking on new variable group, giving the variable group a name, and then you can add variables right over here. This will be a combination of names, so key values, and the values of that specific variable name. And then you can use that variable name in both the release and in the build stages. Third thing that we wanted to touch is the secret management, because you don't want to have credentials inside your repository clear text. That's not a good idea. So we're going to store our secrets somewhere. Where can we do this? Two options. We can do it in a variable group. So if we would create a new variable inside this one, inside our variable group, my secrets, then we can enable this one, this option right over here. So if we enable this, then we make our variable from clear text to a secret. And if we do this, then you will see that we only have the asterisks available, asterisk characters, and we can enter our secret. The user cannot see it, we cannot see it, we cannot read it, but our release and our build pipeline can use it. So it can read out this value in our release pipeline. We only have to use the variable with the name mySecret. This is okay if you only use that secret in your CI/CD pipeline, but if you have a secret that you want to use in Azure as well, then this is not the utmost ideal way, of course. So we're going to remove this. And I think most of the people already know the solution. We're going to dive into our subscription again. We're going to go for key vaults. So we can use an Azure Key Vault to store those credentials and use those credentials or those secrets in our CI/CD pipeline. Over here, I have a Key Vault configured with some secrets. Most of the WVD people will recognize those ones. These are my domain credentials, my local admin credentials. This is still from the WVD v1, so where you need to have a tenant admin. So you can store all those secrets in here. Do not forget to give your service principal permissions using the access policies. As you can see, my Azure DevOps SPN has get and list permissions, which is sufficient to do all those operations. So this means that my SPN can read those secrets. And if we go back into our Azure DevOps and we go for a variable group, then you can see that I have a second type of variable group over here. And I have the option link secrets from an Azure Key Vault as variables enabled. If you enable this, you get to select a subscription. I selected my SPN, so my service principal, my service connection. And you can get a list of all key vaults which are enabled for this specific SPN. As you can see, my CI/CD key vault is listed, and then we can add or remove specific secrets to be listed in in this variable group. I selected them all, and then those variables are available now in this variable group, and we can start using it. Last one is repository. So we're going to create a repository so we can use it. It's as easy as going into repositories. You hit at the top the drop-down list. You click on new repository and you can start creating your new repository. As soon as you have this, you're good to go and you can start working with your CI/CD pipeline. Now we're going to dive a bit into a more advanced CI/CD pipeline, where we will first code everything in Visual Studio Code. I'm not going to demo that one. I'm going to focus more on Azure DevOps part. So we have everything in Visual Studio Code. As soon as we push this into our repository, we need to do a pull request, of course, because we're going to protect our master branch. As soon as we do the pull request, there's a trigger to start our build phase. So that Azure pipelines will start the build. As soon as the build is successful, it's going to go to release. And over here in release, we're going to first create a storage account, which we can use to store files, of course. In a normal WVD deployment, you always use the configuration.zip file from Microsoft. But if you want to have your own repository independent from Microsoft, you can create it yourself. Oh dear. You can create it yourself. So we will upload it into our new storage account, create a SAS token, and we're going to use this SAS token to create new session hosts. Next to that, also our key vault is important because we're going to use our key vault with the secrets, and we're going to deploy that one into our WVD environment. And that altogether will be a WVD deployment. Again, enough slides, demo time. This is our repository. As I said, it contains both RM file and scripts. This one contains a log analytics because you need log analytics for your monitoring, especially with WVD. You want to monitor your WVD environment itself with the WVD insights, but also your virtual machines. So we're going to deploy a log analytics. We're going to deploy WVD. Every section or every object of WVD has its own folder and its own template. So I did a split up of every WVD object, did it in a separate JSON file, so we can really control everything that we deploy. This is for the workspace, and as you can see, if I enlarge this a bit, then you can see I have two parameter files. If you have multiple regions, you can create a parameter file for each region. If you want to deploy a MEA and a UAT environment where you can test upcoming WVD updates, where you can test upcoming WVD features, where you also can test updates from Microsoft, it's definitely a good way to go and use a UAT environment. So this is my workspace deployment. Then I have my EMEA, where I put in the description, my workspace name, etc. A UAT next to that, but also the same for host pool, application group, and very important, the diagnostics, which will also be using the diagnostic settings for both the workspace, host pool name, desktop application group, remote application group. It's all monitored from our CI/CD pipeline. And then most important, our session host, but I will come back to that a bit later on. As you can see over here, I included a YAML file. So the YAML file describes the build phase, as it is called in Azure DevOps now, it's pipeline. But if you look closely at the bottom URL, it's still called build over here. So I keep using build. So in the build, we're going to use this YAML file. And in the YAML file, we can describe which actions need to be taken. It has a trigger. So as soon as we alter the master branch, this will kick in. We're going to use the latest of the Ubuntu. We're going to use the variable group. The variable group, as I described over here, so my WVD CI/CD secrets. And then we're going to perform a validation on all those RM files that we have over here before we do anything. So in build, we're going to do a validation of all those RM files. And at the bottom, we do a copy files from both RM templates and also the script folder over here. But script will be touched in the next section. And the last step is, of course, publish everything into the artifact. If we look at a run from this YAML file, I already prepped it and run it before, so you don't have to wait for it. And we look into the job, then you will see that all those steps are included. First step is download secrets. This is not a step that we put in over here manually. It's something that Azure DevOps translates for you, because we say, okay, we want to use a variable group, and Azure DevOps translate this into an action download secrets. And as you can see over here, those secrets are downloaded indeed into variables or into variables that the environment and the build can use. And then you can see all those validation actions. Last step are the two copy actions and the publish artifacts. And as you can see over here, we have one artifact published, and then you can look and see what is indeed into the artifact. And this is all that we need. After that, we come to the part that we want to deploy and release. So this is this section where all the magic happens. Sorry about the background noise, but there we had an issue with the plumbing, so the plumber is working over there, so sorry about it. But if we look into the release that I prepared, we have the EMEA, where we have one job and 10 tasks. First, deploy log analytics. That's the first step that we take. We can already deploy also the diagnostics. We're going to deploy a storage account. Storage account described over here. So a storage account that we want to use in EMEA. We want to retrieve the account name, the storage account name, because in this release, we don't want to have any hard-coded parts. So what we did over here is use this output name from our template, and we're going to use this into a variable in our CI/CD pipeline. So we don't have to hard code anything into the variables over here. We just use that output. And then we have an Azure Powershell script, and that Azure Powershell script is located in the scripts folder right over here, upload config, and it's going to take our own configuration.zip file containing the DSC script from WVD, and it's going to upload this into our storage account, which we can then use to deploy our session hosts. Because over here we have workspace host pool application groups all deployed, but over here we add some parameters where we use our secrets. So no hard-coded secrets, all from the key vault, but also our WVD DSC URL. So we're using the SAS token and the blob URI from the script that we're using and that we're uploading into our own storage account. So we're no longer dependent from Microsoft. If Microsoft changes something, we can still tackle it and keep our own version. This is a more advanced CI/CD pipeline. After CI/CD pipeline, we're going to touch GitHub Actions as well. My cat also wants to join. First things first, the same as we had in the Azure DevOps part, we want a connection to Azure. How we're going to do this? We're going to run a command. I always do this in the portal from Azure. I will show it to you later on in the shell. And we're going to use AD. So we're going to touch AD. We're going to create an SP credential. But most importantly is this one. So --SDK-auth. That will give us an output from a JSON object. And it contains a client ID, client secret, but also the information that GitHub Actions need to connect to your environment. So as you can see over here, I opened my shell. I just typed in this command line with the SDK-auth in it, and it gives me a JSON object. If you copy this one, then you can go to your GitHub action. So over here, I have a repository. In my repository, you go for settings. And at the bottom, you have secrets. And as you can see in the secrets, we can add a new repository secret. I already added mine. So this is my Azure creds. If you would create a new one, then you can say, okay, my updated creds, and you type in this JSON object. So just copy this full JSON object, type it in over here, click on add secret, and then you can use this secret value to connect GitHub Actions to your Azure environment. So this is the ideal way and the only way to connect that. Next to that, we're going to create a workflow. So let's go back to our environments. I wanted to keep this more basic and only add workspace. So I added a folder workspace. Again, the same as we had before, only adding a workspace in it. But next to that, we have our workflow. And if you look at the workflow, you can again use YAML to describe which actions GitHub Actions need to take. We're going to start with main. In the main, kind of the same structure as we have in GitHub Actions, a bit different, but you will see most of the things coming back. We need to create a trigger, so on a pull request in our main branch, because in GitHub, the top branch is called main, so we will be using main. We're going to start a specific job. This job will be named build. So build will be our validation. Again, Ubuntu latest. First a checkout. If you want to add some PowerShell scripts, perfectly possible. And then we're going to use our secrets. In secrets, my Azure creds. That's the secret that we created at the first step. And we're going to use this one to log in into Azure. So we're going to use the login part from Azure, put in our secrets, and then GitHub Actions is able to connect into our environment. And next up is an RM deploy, and we're going to do a validation first from this RM template. So that template can be validated and can be used. This is ideal if you want to check it. It's kind of like a build. The awesome thing in GitHub Actions is that you can also use those builds, so the pull requests, and make sure that you cannot commit anything into your branch, into your main branch, before it is validated and it is checked by a validation. How we're going to do this? If you dive into the settings from your repository, you click on branches, and then you can set up a branch protection rule. Already did. I added one, so you can just click on add rule. It will be the same as over here, and then you have to specify a branch pattern name. I only have one branch, so I'm going to use main, and main is the one that will be protected. And then you can check over here, require status checks to pass before merging, which enables you to select specific deployments, like we have over here. So they're called build. And if you check this, it becomes required. If you then click on save changes, this means that before you can do a pull request and finalize the pull request, it needs to complete this build phase in GitHub Actions in the workflow. So it cannot be merged into the main branch before this stage has been completed. To show you this, I'm going to change something. I'm going to change the parameters. Click on edit. Going for demo 2. Create a new branch. Propose change. Demo change. And I'm going to create a pull request. Now what you will see, some checks haven't been completed yet, which means that our branch is protected. And it needs to run those actions before it can be merged into the main branch. Because I'm an administrator, I can still merge this, even though it's not completed yet. As a non-administrator, you would not be able to do this. But in the background, something is happening. What is happening? If we would go for our actions, then you can see that there is a workflow running in the background. And the workflow, what is it doing? It's doing our build job. So the build job will do a checkout. It will do that PowerShell script. It's a one-liner, so it's just a demo. Do the login into Azure. So you can see GitHub Actions is connecting to my Azure environment. And it will validate this template. As soon as this is completed, then you will see that all checks have been passed and we can merge this pull request, enabling us to fully merge everything into the production environment. After that, you can also set up a release YAML file, which says if we push, so no pull request, but if we push into our main, we do again a build just to make sure that everything still is validated. And then we're going to do an incremental into our Azure environment. So if we go for our pull requests and we're going to merge, and we go back to our actions, then you will see that we have two stages first. First build and validate, and after that deploy to Azure. So in this way, we have a full CI/CD pipeline up and running. If we want to have a conclusion, because that's something that most of the people want to see, there's no good or bad. Both solutions are really good. If you go for a basic CI/CD pipeline, like even the one that I did in Azure DevOps, it will work in both. So it will work in Azure DevOps and it will work in GitHub Actions. They both work with YAML, so it can be stored into the repository, so you can control all the actions that are happening in build, can control all the actions that are happening in the deployment. Even in Azure DevOps, if you want to, you can do everything in build, so you can really control everything using YAML. Both work with one or more jobs. As you can saw in GitHub Actions, you can have multiple jobs with multiple steps. The same with Azure DevOps. if we would go into our DevOps, we can add additional stages, as it's called in Azure DevOps. We can multiple stages. We can have multiple jobs. So there is not only one now, but we can also add an additional job at the bottom. So if we want to have additional jobs, perfectly possible. I have a case, or I have multiple cases where we need some parts to be run in Linux, some parts to be run in Windows. Perfectly possible. Also, again, multiple tasks, multiple steps, all available. Also, self-hosted and Microsoft-hosted agents are available, so these are available in both. But if you really need advanced pipelines, at this stage, it still is going to be Azure DevOps, because Azure DevOps has options like approvals. You can add gates both and approvals as well before a stage, after a stage. If you want parallelism, where you will run your tasks again and again, but also across multiple resource groups, for example, using a specific variable, then you need to go to Azure DevOps. Also, the variables can be created in the separate section in Azure DevOps, where it is not available in GitHub. GitHub, you need to create a secret, and that secret can be used across all those workflows, where variables is really across multiple repositories, multiple stages, multiple build releases. So that's more global. Also, Azure DevOps can use other source controls where GitHub will be GitHub only. Next to that, if you want to automate code reviews, like you saw in the demo, do some pull request checks, definitely GitHub Actions. That's really easy and super fast to set up. I think my time is up already. I just want to thank the partners, of course, to make this session available, to make this event possible. Again, a big shout out to Simon, to Patrick, also to Stefan for this awesome event. I don't know, Stefan, if there are any questions. Also, do not forget to evaluate this session using the QR code. Please let us know if it was a good session, or things that I need to change. That's always interesting to know.
Yeah, so thank you, Micha.